Hello my fellow Hallowed Hunters, this is the Souls Fanatic, and today I will show you how to make the Crest of Artorias from Dark Souls. As always, a list of materials is in the description below, and time skips to each step is pinned in the top comment. Our first step is to transfer our template to the sheet metal using embossing. You're going to want to print out a few copies of your template and tape the corners of one of those down to the metal. You also need a thick foam mat so that the metal has room to bend while you begin embossing with these ballpoint stylus. You will need varying sizes of these styluses to get different patterns while pushing down on the metal. Alright, with your template taped to the metal on top of your foam mat, we can begin embossing the metal. Take your stylus, and we will start by pushing down the background using a stippling technique. Normally, metal embossing is done on metal foils, however the tin foil was too weak for my design, and I had to use tin sheet metal instead. The sheet metal I'm using is thin and is normally used in an embossing press, however I don't own a press, so we're going to have to do it by hand. Oh, and boy does it hurt, so if you plan on making this one, prepare for some pain, because it's a lot of work. Stippling will create this nice dented pattern for our background as if it were hammered into shape. You'll want to use the large ballpoints for the large areas and the small ballpoints for any outlines or details. You will have to dent the area several times to start seeing results, but eventually it should start looking like this, with your patterns beginning to show up on the back. You must keep going until the entire pattern is visible on the back of the metal. Make sure to use the small ballpoints to trace the outlines, and eventually it will look like this with all the background popped out on the back. But we're only halfway done with this step 1, because we're now going to trace all the faces using the large ballpoint. Now we're going to use a line technique to give the design some depth. So just trace all the details faces with the stylus a few times, and then we can take off the template to see the results. We can finish off our design by cleaning up these shapes. For step 2, I have cut out the crest to make it easier to work with. We will be using black ink to color in the indents, and wiping it away with this scrap cloth. You're going to want to add a few drops around the piece. Then take the cloth and spread it around. Once it's all coated black, take a dry piece of cloth and wipe away the top surface. The black should settle into the back, and the top should be shiny. For step 3, we will cut out the circle using this wooden disc. First, you're going to trace with a Sharpie to get a nice even circle. Then cut around it, leaving about a 2 centimeter border. So this means don't cut on the Sharpie line, but cut next to it. Now when cutting the metal, be very careful. The metal will be very sharp and leave splinters. I'm not responsible for your life choices, so proceed at your own risk. Once the metal is cut, begin curling the edges around the wooden disc. You may want to use a large ballpoint to round the border out. You should end up with a nice smooth border. For our final step, I will stain this wooden disc and fill in the back with resin. The resin will make sure all the details become permanent. I'm going to use a dark stain, dab a little on my cloth, and begin wiping it onto the disc. The more stain you add, the darker the wood. Now for the resin, you will need the resin and the hardener. And I'm going to add some black pigment as well. This resin is a 1-to-1 ratio, so I will use the measuring teaspoon to get equal parts resin and hardener. It is very important to mix equal parts or else the resin will not solidify. I will use this small disposable cup to mix the resin with these toothpicks. Make sure you have cover in case of spills, because this does not wash off once it hardens. I will begin by measuring a teaspoon of the resin and pouring it into the cup. Make sure you clean the teaspoon. Then we can measure the teaspoon of hardener and pour it into the cup. You will then take your toothpicks and begin mixing thoroughly and carefully. You want to be sure to mix all of it, but do not create bubbles. Then add a tiny drop of pigment and mix it in. Once you're done mixing, spread the resin along the back of the crest. Next, you're going to take the stained disc and place it in the resin. You will have to wait 2 days for the resin to harden. Then finally, I will do a few touch-ups and sand off the metal edges with some 80 grit sandpaper. And with that, the crust is finished. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I will hopefully get another video out eventually, but since I'm stuck in college and Sekiro's coming out soon, I don't know when that will be. But the next project is the Ring Knight Straight Sword, so I hope you'll be patient because that one's going to be awesome.